All right, let's go ahead and start with the focus questions. Now that you're finished reading, what does government do? But more importantly, how does it impact you? What is limited government? How does limited government affect you? And then last but not least, you should differentiate between direct democracy and indirect democracy. All right, easy enough. Let's go ahead and look at the next slide. So what does government do? The key functions of it. And if you're reading, it's pretty straightforward. Protecting the citizens, protecting the integrity of the border, national security, preserving order and stability, that's like after natural disasters, establishing and maintaining a legal system in the country, courts, how things operate, state-to-state relations, providing services, that's like bridges and roads and highways and all that kind of stuff. How do you pay for all that stuff we just talked about at number 4? Number 5, raising taxes and spending taxes. And then the last one, is socializing new generations. And the way we do that is establishing schools and states and rules for schools. And you guys are in a class right now that is directly attributed to that. You're in a government class, so you can learn how government operates so that you can become an effective citizen. In fact, your whole high school education with social studies has been geared towards making you a more well-informed citizen of the United States. In world history, we focus on Western civilization, which is the build-up to the United States. And then in U.S. history, we look at the development of our government and our country over the last 250 years. And then finally, government and how government actually operates, your senior year. So those 3 courses combined should, in theory, make you a more informed and knowledgeable voter when you are 18. So, but if you look at those 6 things, that's what government does for you. So let's go ahead and go to the next thing. And I had you guys read types of government, and I only wanted you to read them so that when we talk about government later on, and I talk about a monarchy or an oligarchy, you understand what it is. I don't need you to memorize it. There's usually no specific AP question about, hey, define monarchy or oligarchy. It's more like, just in reference, when we talk about how governments operate. So in the last one there, is democracy, which we should be familiar with as Americans. Then we have totalitarian governments like North Korea, or authoritarian governments like China and Cuba are authoritarian. And then lastly, we have constitutionalism, which ties back into our form of democracy because we combine the two to make, the United States of America. All right. Next up, modern political philosophy. I'm just going to put all these up here real quick for you guys. So this is where we're going to take a little pause for just a moment. You're going to need 3 note cards. You're going to need a note card for Thomas Hobbes. You can just say Hobbes. You can say Locke and Rousseau. Each one of those gentlemen is going to get a note card. Now, here's why. These are probably the only 3 historical figures, along with maybe Thomas Jefferson, that you're really going to need to know for the AP test. Okay, I lied. There's a Hamilton and Madison too. But for now, Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau. So from the reading, let's go to Hobbes. Hobbes talks about the social contract. And he kind of comes up with the idea that all of us in some way kind of delegate authority to some leader. That on a subconscious level, we say, all right, that guy's stronger than me. If I join up with him, he'll help protect me. And we grow from there. If I join up with that bigger group of people, they're stronger, they're going to help me and keep me safe. And that's how governments begin, is Thomas Hobbes' belief, is that we start joining up together and giving up our personal freedom for protection by joining part of a larger group on a subconscious level. It's not like a conscious thought usually. So the idea is that we kind of enter into this social contract. Protect me, and yes, you can abuse me a little bit as long as you protect me. And you can see that's like 1651 up here. You don't have to put the year. But then we have the development of that same idea. John Locke comes along a few years later, and he says, yes, we all enter into these governments through the social contract. We subconsciously and voluntarily, give legitimacy to our leaders. But John Locke takes a different approach, and he says that when we join the social contract, it's to preserve 3 important things. Our fundamental natural rights, or nowadays we tend to refer to them as human rights. And his idea was that government protects those things. And you can see up here that those fundamental natural rights or life, liberty, and property, which don't forget that. It's going to come up again very soon and sounds pretty familiar to you hopefully. But that's Locke. So Locke is social contract, but it protects natural rights. Then we have Jean-Jacques Rousseau, 1760. And again, if you look at the year here, we're getting pretty close to the American Revolution. So he's a contemporary of Thomas Jefferson and Adams and Hamilton and Washington and Franklin, who are helping to establish our country in just a few years. So they're reading his stuff. This is like current stuff to them. And Rousseau takes the social contract in a different direction. He says, yes, the social contract to protect your rights and that we enter into with our governments on a subconscious level exists, but it's based on popular sovereignty. And again, this is one of your key vocabulary words. Popular sovereignty means that the people give it its legitimacy. And if we don't think it's legitimate and we remove our consent, that government dissolves. So you need a card for each one of these, like I said before. Hobbes, social contract, and you can just leave it at that. Locke, social contract, but to protect natural rights, and then Rousseau, social contract, is based on popular sovereignty. Those should be your 3 no cards. I think on last year's AP test, Rousseau was referenced in one of the multiple choice questions. So be prepared to see these names again. And if you're ever having a discussion later on in a higher level poli-sci class, these guys are talked about often as, the foundational thinkers for modern political philosophy. All right, last but not least, and this comes to your direct democracy and indirect democracy. Again, 2 terms you have in your note cards you did over the summer. And really what I need you guys to be able to do is differentiate between these. What is direct democracy versus what is indirect democracy? Direct democracy, if you read that definition up there, it's pretty simple. All citizens discuss and decide policy through majority rule. So what would that look like today in America? That would mean every law that's passed across the entire country and in every state would have to be voted on and discussed by the people in that jurisdiction. So if it's a national law, like I know right now where they're talking a lot about potential, firearm regulations. If we lived in a direct democracy, every U.S. citizen of voting age would have the ability to discuss it and have to vote on it. There would be no vote in Washington. The entire American public would vote on that today to make that happen. Okay, that's direct democracy. Okay, then we have indirect democracy. Okay, that's a system in which citizens elect representatives who decide policies on behalf of their constituents, and constituents is the people they represent. So this is really what we live in America today, is we live in an indirect democracy. People, if you look at poli-sci books, will say that the United States is a representative democracy, which means we vote for the people that make laws for us. And this is how it happens. So again, if we're talking about the gun control issue, that's happening today in America. Our legislators in Washington, our U.S. senators, our state representatives would have discussions amongst themselves, what gun control looks like, how it should work, how it should operate, some of the other rules about it, and then they would vote amongst themselves to either create a new gun control law or to not have any gun control laws. And then that law would take effect in the entire United States. And we're not having to vote directly on it. We're not having to discuss it. They're doing it all there. But if we're being good citizens, we're telling our representatives how they should do it. We're reaching out and we're calling and we're saying, hey, please vote this way, please vote that way. I think this would be a good idea. And if your representatives are good, delegate representatives, they're going to listen to what you have to say and take it with them to Washington and make that part of their push on either side of that discussion point. So that's your reading for today. I hope that helps out a little bit. Again, if you have questions, hit me up and I'll be more than happy to answer.